Okay, so we're going to start the rendering process of this. Make sure you've deleted your old preferences and you've copied in your new preferences. Make sure you've gone through and opened Maya up and set your project to the correct project. And then you've gone through and opened up. Waiting. Opened up your latest scene. There it is. There's my latest scene. So then I hit open. Okay, so I've renamed this one rendering, so that's where I'm going to start rendering. And with this, our goal in this is that we're going to output several different files here that we can use to then go back and composite. Okay, so one file that we're going to output is called an ambient occlusion pass, and this is kind of what it looks like. This one hasn't been gamma corrected, so it's a little bit grayer than I want it to be. So it'll be adjusted a little bit more later, okay, or it'll look more adjusted. We also want to output a depth pass. This is the depth pass. Basically, what's close to the camera is white, and the further we get away from the camera is going to turn black. That's what a depth pass is going to be. There's an incandescence pass, which isolates these light bulbs that are on, the ones that are glowing right now. And there's the master beauty, which is this. It's a little bit dark, again, because it's linear. It hasn't been color corrected. And then these other ones I'm just going to show you what they are. This is a UV pass. This is if we wanted to like retexture something inside of Nuke, we could retexture something inside Nuke or add more texture to it. Not necessarily like retexturing the whole thing. And then this one is a world position pass. I'll show you what that one can do also. Okay. Now you don't have Nuke on your computer at home, so you can't really do it the full-blown way right off the bat, so we have to kind of slim it down a little bit. All right. So we're going to our render settings, and we're going to set up some of these passes here. I'm just going to delete them so that we can start from scratch. There we go. All right. So now over here on your channel box, there's a render tab. You can set up multiple render layers and have different things render out, but we don't need it to do that in this case. All we need to do is render right to the master layer. So we don't even need to affect this. So it's there, we'll get to it, we'll play with it, but for right now we're going to leave it alone. So in the render settings, remember the clapper with 2 dots, passes, because we're rendering through mental ray. We're going to click on this top little thing. Sometimes this is hidden like that, so you have to expand this. And then we're going to add in what we need. Okay, there's ambient occlusion, camera depth, incandescence, and that's all. Okay, those are the 3 that we're going to need: ambient, camera depth, incandescence. Okay, and I'm going to add in UV pass and world position just so I can show you what they're going to do. Make sure I got them all. AO, depth, incandescence, yes. Okay, so I hit create and close. Minimize that. And this up here is the scene passes. So I have to associate these scenes with this master layer. And the way we do that is simply highlighting them and then saying associate. Okay, if they're up here, they won't do anything. They have to be down here. That means they'll actually separate those things out. So if I go into my AO, so I just double click it, there's a couple options. There's an 8-bit, 16-bit, integer, 16 float, 32-bit float. Okay, we're sticking with the 16 float. We're not going to change this. If you're working on a production that needs 32-bit, you would change it to 32-bit, of course. So down here, we're going to say use local AO settings. And I'm going to show you what these things will do. But essentially, we want the max distance to be set to 5 and the spread to be about 0.8. Those are good default settings. If this isn't at 5, typically you'll get solid white or you'll get something that looks funky. But for whatever reason, 5 seems to be a good starting point in most things that I do. For the rest of these, UV pass, depth, incandescence, and world position, you don't need to set any of these. These are all already set up and already good. Okay, so now we have to go under features, and we have to ensure that ambient occlusion is checked. Otherwise, we won't get the ambient occlusion pass out, even though we told it to render ambient occlusion out. Under quality, I'm just going to take my quality setting back down to 0.2-ish. There we go. Under indirect, I'm just making sure my final gather's on, making sure these numbers are still low. Under the common tab, I'm going to make sure that this is set to Maya if. We're eventually going to render these as OpenEXR, but for now we're doing it as Maya if just so we can see what this is going to look like. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find a good camera angle, so something like this, and we're going to hit the render button, and when it's done rendering, I'll be back. Alright, so now we're back, finally rendered out, and if I look at my passes here, here's my AO. I'll have the AO pass, which looks like that. And you can see here it's a bit brighter and lighter and brighter. Here's my depth pass. Here's incandescence. Here's master beauty. And then again my UV pass and my world position pass. Okay, so now those look good. If something wasn't good, most likely it's going to be the AO. So I can come back into my render settings, go back to AO, and just play around with this max distance number is typically the culprit. If you've created your scene enormously large, you may have to put this up to 10 or 20 or 30. If you've created super tiny, it might have to be 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever. Okay, so I kind of model everything in the same realm, so 5 for me always seems to work. You can see that there's a bit of grain in this. There's a bit of noise happening all over the place. Okay, some of this noise will be taken with our other render settings and cleaned up. This frame took 3 minutes. The first one I showed you took about 6 minutes. And it's just going to take longer the more we kind of up our settings. Alright, so one thing we can do is if we go through just to clean up some of this noise, and we go to our outliner, I grab my main light, I go to the settings here, I can go right to where it says mental ray, where it says area light, and I can take these samples up to like 16 or 32. Don't just jump. Don't go through and set this to like 128 right off the bat, because then it's going to take a lot longer to render. So I would say start it off at 16, or if you know you have a lot of noise right now, then maybe set it to 32. But don't just jump up to high numbers just to jump up to high numbers and not have to play with it. So I actually don't have a lot of noise in mine, so I'm just going to set both of these to both my main light and my fill light to about 16. Okay, so that will take care of some of this noise that's happening in these shadowy areas. You can see there's also noise happening like on my can. There's also noise happening on the ground and on here. So there's several spots where these things come in. If I grab the cap and I go to the cap here, because I took my glossiness down from 1, I have a sample value here. So I'm going to take that up to 16. My can, I didn't take the glossiness down, so there is no glossy samples. It's good. My cream, I'm going to take that up. My sign, I'm going to take that up. I have 2 things here. The label also, 16. My backdrop is good. Alright, so that's another spot. The other spot that I can play with is in our render settings under the quality tab is this unified sampling. I'm going to bring this up to 1, and what that should do is clean out a lot of the noise. Okay, so if I go into an area like this and I just do a little marquee, I click the box to render the region, I'll be back and we'll take a look at it. Alright, so now you can see this is done, and if I look at this, this definitely looks a lot smoother. Okay, you can definitely tell here to here and here to here that we definitely have a smoothness that has been fixed. Now just for this tiny area that I did, that took 2.5 minutes. The first one took 3 minutes. We can also come through our passes here, and you see that even though we, oops, I don't know what I'm doing with that. Even though we only render the region, that is still rendered out the passes for that region. Alright, so we still have that stuff there. There's my depth and so on. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. If I needed to adjust it, I could adjust it further. Alright, so now our next step is to set up a camera for this. I have a camera set up right here, and it's not a very good camera. Okay, I'm going to hit play. Okay, it's an okay camera. It's just not perfect. If I go a little bit quicker, you can see right here there's like a little stopping point. The motion is flowing in one direction, and then it kind of cuts and goes in a different direction. Alright, I don't really care for that kind of movement. Okay, and there's my camera right there. Alright, so I'm just going to hide that camera so we can not see it. So we're going to create a new camera. So we're going to go to Create, Cameras, Camera, like that. Just regular camera. Okay, so I'm going to look through that camera. So I go to Panels, Perspective, and this one's going to be Camera 1. And I'm just going to set this up and kind of frame it how I want it to start off. Okay, I need to click on the blue circle so I get my resolution of 960 by 540. Okay, and we don't want to start off somewhere like this and then coming into view. Okay, we want this to be just a simple sweep or a simple rotation of our scene. Okay, so I'm just going to set this up and get it kind of framed. I like to be a little bit lower because I get better reflections if I'm a little bit lower. Okay, if you're up here like this, you're going to get reflections of this ground. It doesn't look as good. So I like to be a little bit lower and get some good reflections. Alright, so I also like to be kind of centered. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to give myself 96 frames. I want to animate it here, doing a little sweep. Now, I'm not going to be able to get that in a nice fluid motion. So what I'm going to do is I have my camera selected still. You see it says Camera 1 right here in the attribute editor or the channel box. I'm going to group it, Control G. Okay, that puts the pivot here. And then I'm going to switch my views to a split side by side. So I'm going to go to this panel layout. Okay, this is my perspective view. This is Camera 1. Okay, so I just went to Panels, Perspective, Camera 1. I'm just going to fix that so I can see the whole thing. So now I'm at frame 1 of my group. I'm going to hit S to set a key. So I'm at frame 1, set my first key by hitting S. I'm going to scroll down here. And I'm going to rotate the camera group. So I'm still on the group. Rotate the camera group around. Just like that, it's subtle. And I hit S again. Okay, so now if I come back in here, rewind, hit play, I get a nice motion of that camera. Now a cool thing that I can do too is if I click back on this select camera button, I can change stuff like the focal length. So I'm going to go to like 20. I can zoom in on this just to give me a little more dynamic motion. So I can change my focal length to 20. I can zoom in a little bit just by holding Alt and then right clicking and dragging. I can even adjust slightly some of the stuff. And then my whole motion is still captured. Okay, I can even animate the camera a little bit too. So I'm going to click on this and hit S to set a key. Go to frame 96. Just kind of center myself a little bit better. And set another key. Okay, hopefully I didn't screw it up. It has to be subtle. If you try to go too much, then it's going to be obvious. Okay, so there's my movement. 96 frames, nice slow movement. I also want to go through my graph editor and kind of tweak some things. So I'm going to go to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. So in the graph editor here, I have the camera selected. I'm going to hit F. And it's going to be hard to kind of see this, so I'm just going to click on one of these. And you can see what this graph is doing is it's slowly coming in and going out and slowing down again. I don't like that. So I'm going to click on my camera, click off, hit F, grab everything, and make it linear, which is this middle guy. Okay. Now I'm also going to go to my group. So I'm going to go to the outliner, grab the group, hit F, grab everything, and hit linear. Okay. And what this is going to do is create just the movement of the camera. It's not going to be any like slowing or stopping. And this, although in a single piece, doesn't act as well, or it doesn't look as good, but if you're putting this in your demo reel, it's going to look much better. Okay, because you don't have that stopping and starting. Okay, also I'm kind of stopping on seeing the Gillette here and the Gillette there. Here I can barely see this Gillette, but I can see that one. Okay. Now, one thing that someone did last semester that you want to watch out for is they had this thing, it was like a barbershop sign. I'm just going to borrow a helix, just so it's a little bit easier to see. Like this. And they animated this thing rotating, but they animated it rotating the same direction that the camera was moving. So kind of like that. So you really couldn't see that it was moving at all. Okay, you can kind of see it moving, but you really can't see it's moving to the same effectiveness that you'd want to see it moving. So let me rotate it the other way. So now you can see definitely that looks like it's moving a lot more than the previous one did. Okay, so now we have our camera set up. Let's go ahead and click on it and rename this to be Render Cam. We're set up here, we're good. My render settings, let's go to the Common tab. This is still set to sRGB and linear. Let's call this Gillette _ Sarcona, enter. Okay, that way we know what the project is, we know our name. We're rendering these out as OpenEXRs. That's going to be our final output. We want to choose RLE from the compression. Make sure we choose name.number.extension. Make sure we choose frame 1 through frame 96. We're going by one frame. Our renderable camera, very important, pick Render Cam. Our output format is 960 by 540. We should be good. Passes are set up, features are set up, quality set up, our indirect lighting is set up. We're good. So let's save this as. And I typically name my stuff, instead of just rendering, because that's my render setup, is ready to render. Okay, that way I know I'm ready to render with this file. So then we go back to rendering. We change this to render batch render option box. And then we say batch render and close. Now this may take a whole day or 2 days or 3 days, 4 days, 5 days to render. If we look at the one that I rendered out, which didn't have terribly high settings, 954 was my first frame, my second frame was 959, and my second frame was third frame was 1004. So it's about 5 minutes a frame. So this took from 8/30, 2013. Oops, I passed it up. I'm going to allow this. Sometimes that'll pop up with my firewall. There it is. 8:12 at night.
Bless you.
Oh wait. 8:31. There we go. To 8:30. Okay, so that basically took most of the night to render, or at least a good portion of it, 6 or 8 hours. Alright, so this may take a long time to render. So you have to keep an eye on it, make sure that your stuff is rendering out correctly and going to the right spot. So I'm just going to double check, common 1 through 96, good. Okay. So once this is done and it's starting to output a frame, right now in my renders or my script editor, this little guy down here on the far right, we get this thing that'll say percentage of rendering done 0, and it's going to process and go through our rendering stuff. I'm just going to cancel mine, but pretending that you actually got a frame out, and it says percentage of rendering 100% for frame 1. You're going to go and open up Nuke. Okay, and you want to open up, there's one that says Nuke X. That's the one you want to open up. Okay, my license expired. I'm in the process of getting a new one, so it's going to take a minute or a day or 2 or whatever to get one. So it's going to ask me, do I want to start in PLE mode? Okay, obviously this stage you have to do at the college because we just don't have that set up yet. Okay, so in PLE mode it's going to be crazy, weird looking once we get into it. So I'm going to read in one of my EXRs. So I'm going to go to this, and I read it in. Okay, now you obviously don't know how to do that, so I'm going to hit the R key. R brings up my read node, and then I just navigate to where my stuff is. So I went to home, I went to desktop, I went to D drive, here, 2520, work, Sarcona, images, and I'm single clicking, don't double click, it's single clicks. And I'm just going to click on this, which is my sequence, Gillette Rendering. There it is, Gillette Rendering, Sarcona 001, 1 through 96. I hit open. So now it's there. So now if I click on this and hit 1, it'll actually connect it to this viewer. This viewer is what allows me to see what my rendering is. Okay, and there's where my personal learning edition comes in, where I have those color marks. Alright, so if I want to see what my things are going to look like, I come up here to the top where it says RGBA, and I can choose alpha. It'll show me the alpha channel. I can choose AO. Here's my ambient occlusion. I can choose the depth pass. Now this one, you're not really going to see anything, but if you look down here where there's a red number, see that red number? It's updating, okay? The depth pass is basically the depth from the camera, so it's actually like a physical number. So it's like 20 units from the camera, 30 units from the camera, whatever it is. Okay, so it is there. My incandescence, which is just my light bulbs. My UV pass, which is like this. And my world pass. So I should be able to come in here, when frame 1 is done, I should be able to look at this and see all of those passes, minus the UV and the world. I don't care if you have those. But the rest of these, the incandescence, the CAM-Z depth, the AO, you need all of those. Okay, and if you don't have those, this whole thing isn't going to work. Alright, so if it happens, then go back to Maya, cancel your batch render, figure out what's wrong, and then render it again. Okay, and then come back into the Nuke and check it out. I've seen way too many times that people render this out. Here it is. So I brought in another sequence, and if I hit play, actually if I just click and drag here, you can see that there's no animation on this. Even your super duper awesome instructor messes up a time or two. And so what happened is I rendered out the wrong camera. So this time I didn't render out the wrong camera, I rendered out the correct camera. Okay, so now I have some movement on there. Now obviously this is the old camera, this isn't the one we just set up. Alright, but you can see the look of this and make sure it's good. And then you can proceed to the next step of this. So if you have one frame, you can set up the next step of this, okay? And then everything else will just kind of trickle in there. So I'm zooming and panning basically the same way. Alt, middle mouse button, or not same way, but a little bit opposite. Alt, middle mouse button is to zoom. Alt, right mouse button is to move it around, okay? This is your node graph down here. This is where we bring in footage, and this is where we play with it. Over here is your properties of whatever you have selected, okay? But you have to double click in order for it to load. So if I have this closed, and I double click this, it'll then show me the properties for that. So right now, if I only had one frame, this will be set to frame range 1 of 1, original range 1 and 1. And down here, I'd be seeing just the one frame, okay? I wouldn't have a bunch of frames. That's fine. So then, once I'm done, then I could just say, okay, well I have 96 frames. We'll punch in 96 frames for both of these, and then I would have my 96 frames. Okay? So now what we need to do is we're going to use these passes here that we rendered out, the AO, the depth, and the incandescence, to add to our scene. So we'll first go in with the AO. So what I need to do first is pull it out of there. So I'm going to add in what's called a shuffle node. So I can go over here, not there, I can go over here where this little 3 thing is, and I can go to shuffle. Okay, now this is a shuffle node. So I need to connect the shuffle to this. So you see there's an arrow up top. This is like, what do you want to connect it to? Right there. So I want to shuffle from here. Basically the shuffle is extracted out. So I can say, okay, I'm going to shuffle. Here's the shuffle controls. The ambient occlusion out. Okay. You'll notice that when I change that, nothing happens. If you see my viewer, it's still connected to this. So what I want to do is connect the viewer to this. You can see how I can just move these arrows around. So now this shuffle is basically just the ambient occlusion. So if I go and I deselect everything, I go and I add another shuffle node, and I drag this arrow here. There we go. I can change this one to be my incandescence. Okay, and again, I can't see it, so I can drag this arrow over there, and now I can see the incandescence. All right, so basically I have two different branches here, and if you're looking at this inside After Effects, just try to stop doing that right now. It's totally different. There are some similarities. You can try to make a relationship, but it's different. Okay, this is more like a tree structure. This is here, it's connected to this, and that's what I'm seeing. All right, if I want to see this one, I connect it there. Okay, and they're all animated, so if I were to click and drag, I can see the animation of it. Same thing here, this is animated. All right, so that basically just pulled those off. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I want to put this back into it. If you look at the bottom of this, you can see how we don't really have any brightness or any darkness right here. Where that's touching, there should be a bit of darkness. Same thing here. So that's what ambient occlusion is used for. Okay, so this here has darkness. So I'm going to take this darkness and make those other areas darker. So I'm going to go back to my shuffle. So I click on the shuffle and I hit 1. I hit M for merge, and that gives me a merge node. And I'm going to connect the A. If you look close, there's an A and a B. I'm going to click the A into my shuffle, click the B into my merge or into my original sequence, and then now if I were to click on this and hit 1, this is giving me the result of this ambient occlusion over this one. Okay, and right now it just looks like ambient occlusion, but you can kind of see the Gillette there. So I'm going to go to the merge, and instead of it being an over, I'm going to choose multiply. Okay. So now I can see this is now multiplied on top of this. And how do I know it is? Well, if I click on the merge multiply and I hit D, that's it before the ambient occlusion. Hit D again to re-enable it, and I can just toggle to see before and after. And you can see the huge difference it makes, especially in the sign. Look at the detail in the sign here with it, now without, with it, without. So it makes it look so much nicer having ambient occlusion on there. If I realize that I've gone too far, I have too much ambient occlusion, I could always use this mix node and do like a half and half. Okay, so 0 is has no ambient occlusion, 1 is full, and somewhere in the middle is somewhere in the middle. Okay, so that's that. So now what I want to do is let me sort these things out. I'm going to put this here, put this one here. Okay, and I'll rename these two. Let me double click this shuffle and say AO underscore shuffle. Okay, and I'll double click this shuffle, and I'll name this one incandescence shuffle. That way I know which is which. Alright. So now what I want to do is I want to use my depth of field. Okay, that's what this camera depth is for. It's for creating depth of field. Right now there's no blurriness to this at all. So I'm going to go back to here because you'll really see it here. I'm going to go, I'm doing it the fast way. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to hit the tab key. And in here we can actually just type in whatever we want. So here I could add a shuffle. I could type in Z to focus. That's the one I want. Okay. So I'm just going to click on the merge, hit the tab key, type Z to focus, and this will pop in a defocus node. So I have to come over here and set some stuff up. This is a big node. So for the depth channel, I have to choose from here my camera depth perspective Z patch. You only have one of these. I have two because I have basically two files loaded. Okay, so I'm picking that. There we go. I'm picking that one, and that's gonna basically read in that value, that red value. So now if I take this focal point and I move it to what I want to be in focus, like I want this T to be in focus. Okay, it's gonna take a second to load, but now you can see that this Gillette is in focus, and it gradually drops the focus off the further we get away. Okay, So I can take this and move this on the can. There we go. Or I can move it, on the line here, or I can move it over to this side of the can, wherever it is. And all this is doing is giving us, where this is located from the camera. This focus plane is actually how far away we are. Okay. Let me just go to the output to, and I'm going to say focal plane setup. Okay. So by moving this point around, I'm moving where it thinks it's in focus. So if I go to somewhere really close to the camera, I'm going to get basically a very narrow view. If I go over here, I'm going to get a little bit more. Okay. Oops. And then I could also change this depth of field. Okay. And add more stuff that's actually like solid in focus. I could change the amount of the blur by adjusting this value. But typically we just need to play with these couple. So I'm going to go back to here and say result. There we go. And if I'm just going to crank this up so you can see it. But we can really add a lot of depth of field to this. And it's not going to look good. This depth of Z defocus that we kind of set up is not like the greatest way to set it up. It's just kind of like a basic way. There we go. So it's okay. It kind of works, but it's not 100% perfect. So I'm just going to leave this at 10 because we don't want it to be crazy. It's not like we're doing wildlife photography. We really want to show the flower blooming and have all the background, fuzzy. So I'm just knocking these values down just so it's subtle. That's the goal with this, is just to be subtle. Okay, so that's it. So I have my focus plane set up and all this other stuff. Now as I move further in my view, like this, well, now my focus plane is going to be changing. So I have to go through this and animate it. So I'm going to right click on focus plane and set a key. I'm going to go up, this is after you have all your other stuff in here. I'll go up 20 frames. I'll move my focus point. There we go. I'll go up another 20 frames, move my focus point again. You don't have to reset a key, it automatically does it. Go up another 20 frames. We're pretty much in the same spot, but I just want to basically have Nuke re-register that. Re-register the fact that we're setting this up. And then go to 96 and remove that in there. Okay, so there we go. Now the fact that we go back to the beginning and this is here, that's not a big deal. We don't care about that because it's already set up. Alright, so now if we go to the next part of this, and I'm just going to zoom out here. Okay, so we have our read node, we have our ambient occlusion that we pulled out, then we multiplied it, then we added our Z blur. Now what we want to do is add in this incandescence. So I'm going to come after this, and I'm going to go to glow. So I hit tab and type in glow. And what's going to happen is the whole image glows. Now I don't actually need this incandescence. I'm going to delete that. Okay, I'm just showing you that you can pull these things out. On the glow area, I'm going to go up here where it says width channel, and I'm going to choose incandescence. It doesn't matter which one of these I choose, because incandescence, the rendering was basically a white image, a black and white image. So I'm just going to choose red. That's the first one. And what that's going to do is isolate the red values of that and give me glows in these areas. Okay, let me turn off this, hide some of those things that were in there, go back to the glow so we can focus on just the glow. And if we look at these lights, they actually look like they're glowing now. I come back to the glow, I hit D, there it was before, hit D again. So you can see how it's adding that little bit of a halo glow to these things. And we can adjust this. I can say, okay, well now that I have that, maybe I want to make my size bigger. So I can make the halos a little bit bigger. Okay, or I can make them tighter too. I can also make them brighter if I really want them to shine. Obviously that's way too much. I could tint them, so if I come in here, there's a little color wheel. If I click on the color wheel and I play with the color values, you see how I can tint them to like a bluish color. I don't actually want to do that, but I can do that. In this case, it doesn't make sense. If we had yellow lights, then yeah, let's go yellow. But in this case, it doesn't make sense. All right, so I'm just going to take the brightness down a bit. I'm going to pull this size up a little bit. And that's good. I like the way that looks. Let me close that. Very cool. All right. And we can adjust it. Now the cool thing about us doing this incandescence pass is that this is animated. So when I rewind this, you see that these things are glowing here. So if I go up a frame, which I think is this one, you see how it switched to the next one. So here's my glow. Let me go back a frame, forward a frame. I'm just using left and right arrows. You see how that glow follows it. Okay? Because if I went through and I look at the incandescence pass, you can see the incandescence pass is also animated. So it kind of follows that whole thing. Now imagine this is a car and we have headlights and stuff. We could animate those headlights shining down the street. Alright, so here's our setup, and it's super duper simple. I just hit the space bar just to get us in here. Space bar gets us out. Okay, so we have our read node. We shuffled out the ambient occlusion. We multiplied it. That's what the merge does, multiply it together. We take our Z to focus, and we blurred it, and we added a glow using the incandescence as a width. Okay, so now this is pretty much done. So if your rendering wasn't done yet, you could at least do, without the animation from here, you could at least do all of this kind of setup here. Okay, so let me just save this. So I just hit Control S. It knows to go into my folder, into my images. So I'm going to say nuke, script, Sarcona, Gillette. That way I know where it is and I know what it's called. Okay. We're going to do one more thing in here. I'm going to create a constant. Okay. And if we're comparing After Effects to Nuke, a constant is basically a solid. Okay. So here's our constant. I'm going to also add in a roto node. So I hit the tab key and type in roto. So there's the roto. And if I come over here, I'm going to click on this and go to ellipse. Okay, and I'm just going to create an ellipse about there. Okay, about the center of this. And I'm going to click on the points and pull them out. Click on this point, there's a little line, pull it out. Click on this point, there's a little line, pull it out. Okay. I want to add some more points in here, so I'm going to go to the Add Points tool. I'm just going to click an extra point in each one of these quadrants and pull these points so they're outside of that area. Okay. Now what is this going to do? Well, we're going to take this, hit M for multiply or merge, not multiply but merge, and I'm going to connect the B in here, connect the arrow here, and you see how it creates this dark spot on top of our stuff. So I'm going to go to the roto, which is right here, roto. I'm going to go down to this grayscale box and click on it, and it's going to invert it. Okay, so now what we have is a vignette. Here's the merge off, merge on. Okay, so if it's too harsh, go to your merge and just play with the mix. Okay, you want a vignette in there because a vignette kind of helps you get people to focus on what the main area is. Okay, so that's cool. And now if we're still rendering, we saved our work, we're still rendering, we let it go. Close Nuke down, let it render. But if we're done rendering, we can come back in here, oops, and I can double click this, and I can change those back to 96 like I had before. Or I can just click the folder and reload that in. Rendering. Okay, or let's pretend that, you know, I wanted to just change this with a completely different thing. I could just hit R and then load in a completely different object and just connect these arrows to it, and now it'll kind of work, except we have to go through and change like our AO, this is now called something else. So we have to connect in the correct AO. And on our Z to focus, this is called something else. We have to click in that Z to focus. Okay, and then stuff will start working again. Alright, so it's cool when you have this set up because then you can just reuse this whole setup over and over and over again. Alright, so I'm going to show you real quick what the other passes are going to do that we set up. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over here. And I'm going to use a position to points. Okay, I'm just going to show the one pass today. And in this, I'm going to say the surface points are the world points, or the world position. Okay, and if I hit the tab, oops, I view this, hit 1, and I hit the tab key up here. I clicked the wrong one. There it is. What this does, it basically rebuilds my scene in 3D. Okay, and again, this is animated, so if I was to scrub, you see how it's adjusting that because it's showing different parts of this. So this is a common thing that companies will do where they rebuild their stuff and then they could drop something right behind it. They don't have to worry about, you know, masking it out or anything. It's just literally dropping it right behind it. So if I created a card and I just put a checkerboard on it, and you don't have to worry about all the stuff I'm doing now. I just want you to see where the possibilities of this could really go. Okay, there's my card. There we go. So now you see I just put basically this checkerboard right behind my work. Okay, obviously it's not pretty in this case, but I could render out each one of these pieces separately inside Maya, bring it back in here, and lay this out. There's other stuff we could do too to kind of get this a little bit more finessey, but without drawing any masks at all, I'm able to come in and utilize this kind of stuff. Okay, now obviously the back's not there because we didn't render the back, we just rendered the front of these things. But there's a huge amount of potential when you're creating this kind of stuff. This could be animated. This could be, oops, this could be smoke or something. Okay, so it's a lot of potential that we have just to be able to do stuff like this. We can relight our scene inside here if we needed to, or add lights to it. Okay, so there it is. Now pretending that we're done, we brought our file in using a read node, so we're going to send our file out using a write node. So we just go to the end of this, our very last node, and go to write. I go to the folder, and I specify where I want this to go. I just have this nuke folder I usually set up, and I just render stuff right to that. But you can save it wherever. Gillette Rendering. That should be Sarcona, and then dot pound dot TIF. You have to put the name, put a dot, put 3 pounds at least, put a dot, and put a TIFF. Okay, that way it knows you're rendering to a TIFF. And then when I hit render, it'll say, where are you going to render this to? I'm going to say, where are you going to render? And I can render just like Maya, a single frame, so if I just type in 1, or I can render a range, 1 through 96. I hit OK. And that's just going to go through and render out frames 1 through 96. Once that's done, I'm going to jump into After Effects and actually wrap this thing up and put it together. Okay, I'm going to hit cancel because I have something else already rendered that I can just do that to. Alright, so we're in After Effects. I'm going to go to my project window here, and I'm going to double click this. And I'm going to go and grab my stuff. 2520. Oops, it's on my desktop. I went to the wrong spot. Work. Gillette. Images. And here's my... That's not the rendering I wanted. In my other folder, I think. Hold on. Alright, there we go. Nuke renders. Gillette images. I render these out as TGA. You can do either format, TIFF or TGA. They both carry an alpha channel. so it's not like you need to worry about that. But typically, once you've gone out of Nuke, you're kind of done and just wrapping it up. So I click on the first one. I make sure that whatever it is, TIFF sequence, target sequence, if sequence is checked. I hit open. It's going to ask me about the alpha. I'm just going to say ignore. Okay. So now there's my footage. I'm going to right click, go to interpret footage, go to main, and just ensure that this is set to 24 frames per second. Okay, that'll give us a couple extra, maybe like an extra second or so of footage. So now I'm just going to take this and drag this down to the new comp right next to the 8 BPC, or I can drag it out here. Either one works. And it creates it. So there's my Gillette can. So now I hit play. Obviously this is a different scene, but essentially the same thing. Okay, we have depth of field on this, we have our glowing, we have our vignette. It looks gorgeous. Okay, I've even done some color shifting to this just to give it, kind of like reinforce the blue and the orange look to it. Okay, we haven't gotten that far yet in Nuke, and I don't want you going too crazy with it right now. Okay, beautiful. So now I would go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. I'm going to click on the word lossless. Oops, before I get there. Sometimes if you're in, not sometimes, but if you're in CS5, it's not going to be File, Export, Add to Render Queue. It's going to be under Composition, Make Movie. Okay? But you can also go to Composition, Add to Render Queue from CS6 or CS5. CC is probably in either spot, so just double check. Alright, so now back to lossless. I'm going to click on the format and choose QuickTime. I'm going to click on Format Options and choose H.264. Make sure these are cranked up and these are unchecked. Okay, so QuickTime here, H.264 there. Hit OK. Where it says Gillette Lights, I'm going to click there. And this is going to be the name of my file once I get it out. So I'm going to call it the name of the project, Gillette, my name, Sarcona, and then F13 for Falls 2013. I hit Save. I hit Render. As a note, when you go to File, Make Movie, sometimes what it'll do is pop open a window asking you where you want to save it. Go ahead and save it there. It doesn't matter. Alright, so now let me go back to my C drive, back to Nuke. Alright, so here's my footage after I found it. I render stuff all over the place for different projects. So here it is. You can see it actually looks a little bit washed out. So we're going to do one more thing to this. I'm going to go to Window, Movie Properties in QuickTime. We're going to go to the video track, Visual Settings. I'm going to choose this to blend and crank it up to 100. Change this transparency to straight alpha and then close it. Then all I have to do is just scrub in here. There it goes. And it'll pop and then we're back to our original quality. So then we just save this. Okay, and now we're ready to go. It's a beautiful file. So we can actually turn this thing in. Okay, and that's all you're going to be turning in is just your rendering from here. Alright, so that's the Gillette can. Save all your stuff because we can reuse the Nuke script, we can reuse our Maya files. When I say we, I mean you. Obviously not me. Alright.